minds of so many civil servants in the country is that the advice that you gave the Treasury, will it cut across the board? Because as we speak, state officers, that's the president, the deputy president, members of parliament, are also a part of the team that your commission sets the salary. So, will it cut across the board?
Thank you, Linda, for that. Yes, just to clarify that when we talk about the role of the commission, let me first start by saying that the commission, as indicated by the earlier speakers, is clearly spelled out in the Constitution, Article 230. The Constitution gives the commission the mandate to make the pronouncements that we did. And one of the key principles that the commission must always take into account is affordability and fiscal sustainability of the wage bill. Linda, I would like to also speak in the context of what you discussed earlier about COVID-19 and really bring to the attention of the public servants and the entire country that indeed globally, this is what has happened. In most countries have actually frozen pay. Some have gone with pay cuts. And even in Kenya, and Kenya is not an island, even in Kenya today, the private sector will tell you that workers have lost their jobs. Quite a number of them have had to do with pay cuts. And those who are actually having a freeze are lucky. In the public sector, I must commend the government for continuing to pay salaries to all public servants. That is not the case in the private sector. So we must go back to the context of the discussion and really put it there that the country cannot afford. We know very clearly what COVID-19 has done to the economy. Treasury has clearly advised that we do need to invest in recovery strategies. And that means that we need to put more resources towards that recovery. Hence the decision to, and I want to clarify, it's not about freezing salaries, because I've heard repeatedly everybody talking about freezing of salaries. What the commission has done is to freeze increasing the pay structures. Now, in the public service, we have a pay structure that determines the minimum and the maximum pay that an employee can be paid. It's now 4 years, so the expectation from many public servants, rightly so, was that the salary structures would be reviewed. But again, can the country afford? No. Hence, that is what the commission said will not happen.
All right.
That is entirely freeze. In our communication, we clearly indicated that there will be some salary adjustments within the existing pay structures. Indeed, Linda, I must say that in the private sector, that is not the case. Most companies cannot even talk about any form of increase, or in fact struggling to pay the salaries that are there. So it's not a total freeze. And just to clarify the last point you said, are state officers also affected? Yes, they are.
All right. But then, Ms. Mengich, it's good you're saying that the country cannot afford anything that has to do with the salary increment. Now, at least you've confirmed it's for both state officers and civil servants. But then, as much as you're saying the country cannot afford a salary increment, allowances, and also non-UCBAs that will be talked about during the next 2 years, it comes at a time when your commission itself gave the go-ahead of giving MCAs card grant. Then, months later, you come and tell the civil servants and the state officers that the country doesn't have a budget for a salary increment.
A clarification. First of all, let me paint a picture of the two figures we're talking about. We did project that any review would cost 82 billion. When we talk about the card grants, we know the amounts. So first of all, you can't compare the two. But let me also clarify that in the case of the card grants, the Council of Governors put it in writing to the Commission and made a request for the card grant. That request was on the basis that there is funding available. So, Linda, those are two different scenarios. In one scenario, there is confirmation that there is funding from the employing entity. In this case, it was the Council of Governors. On one hand, the National Treasury has clearly stated that there is no money. But let me also clarify something else that is often misunderstood about this car grant. Every public servant today, whether state officers or public officers, are facilitated to discharge their roles. You either get a car in case of a state officer, which is the car is fully maintained, is chauffeur driven by the government. In Parliament, they also get an allowance that enables them to buy a car, to fuel, maintain the car. So we cannot therefore say that it is fair to treat an MCA differently and more or less say to them, take care of your own transport.
Right.
And I can tell you, in other public servants, they are also facilitated. So, Linda, this was an issue of an outstanding benefit that had been discussed right from 2014. And from 2014 until last year, the county government said they could not afford.
All right.
Was it?
All right. And allow me to cut you short, Ms. Mengich, because when I look at the mandate of the commission is to give advice and set salaries for civil servants, you know, and also state officers. But from the way union officials and civil servants are talking, no consultation was done, no proper consensus building was done before you gave your advice to the Ministry of Treasury.
Let me clarify that the Commission does not negotiate with trade unions. That is the role of the employer. The role of the employer, of the SRC, is to advise the employer. Was there consultation with employers? Yes, absolutely. All the employers, we had meetings with them, and we taken them through the decision that had been arrived at in consultation with Treasury. So that is our mandate is to advise employers. It is the employer who will then discuss with the trade union how to negotiate in the context of the advice given by SRC.
All right. So, Madam Chair, why 2 years? Why not 1 year or 3 years for this, freeze of salary increment and allowances?
It is based on the projection by the National Treasury as to when the economy is likely to improve. So it is indicative of 2 years. If the economy does not improve, Linda, it can even be more than 2 years. So it's really an indicative figure based on the projections by the National Treasury that within 2 years, we expect the economy will recover. And clearly in our statements, we did say after the 2 years, there will be a review to see whether the economy has recovered or not. And if it has, and the economy can afford a review, yes, it will happen.
All right. It's good you're saying that you consulted the employers of the workers, but then from the workers' union, they were not consulted. And the workers' unions, through not Treasury, but through the Central Organization of Trade Union, that is COTU as of last week, and also even the nurses' unions yesterday, gave an ultimatum, a 14-day ultimatum to your commission to rescind its decision to the advice, rather, that you gave Treasury and was gazetted, or else services will be paralyzed in all government institutions. Are you ready for a roundtable meeting with the workers' unions?
Linda, let me point out that the trade unions entered into an MOU with the employers, with FKE and the Ministry of Labour. The content of that MOU is exactly the same as what we have said. In fact, there is nothing different, and I would urge everybody to read that MOU. It did recognize that because of the pandemic, that employers and the trade unions are encouraged to sit, social dialogue, and discuss. And it even lists among that, discuss even pay cuts. So the MOU that was signed is still valid, and it is up to the trade unions to discuss with the employers about their collective bargaining agreements. The Commission has not said you cannot go and discuss with your employer. The employer will still negotiate with the trade unions, but in the context of the advice of the SRC. So, Linda, it has not stopped any dialogue between employer and the trade unions. They should continue and go ahead to dialogue and take into account our advice, also take into account the very MOU that they signed themselves and I am sure that it is valid. Otherwise, they would not have signed that MOU.
So as for the SRC, have you confirmed, or do you have any idea whether the workers' union has have already started having a conversation with the employer so as to avert that looming strike, because it is a 14-day ultimatum?
The process, Linda, is that the employer, when a collective bargaining agreement comes to an end, the employer writes to SRC. We then advise them on the parameters for negotiations. That process still continues, and therefore the employers are still writing to us. We're still writing to give them the advisory, and that is the way it should be handled.
All right. And Ms. Mengich, your commission has been at loggerheads with the several government institutions in terms of when it comes to pay as civil servants, members of parliament. Anytime the SRC is talking about their pay, it's been at loggerheads with them. So what does this mean for the commission that you're leading?
First of all, Linda, let me clarify. I don't think it is correct to say we are at loggerheads. Most of the time, in fact, we do give advisories, they are implemented. In one or two situations, there may be an issue, but that is probably less than 10%. So let me just clarify that that is not the correct picture. The advisories of the commission are implemented by the employers. There are very few that come to the fore where the other party may not agree. So what does it mean for the commission? The commission will continue to discharge its role. And Linda also wants to speak that the commission is speaking on behalf of the taxpayer, who has a right to say, how should my money be spent? As a country, through the Public Finance Management Act, it is a requirement that not more than 35% of revenue is spent on the wage bill. At the moment, we are at 51.7%. What does it mean to the citizens of this country when we are spending 51.7% revenue on salaries alone? It means out there, Wanjiku is not getting the services that they deserve to get. It means out there, development is not happening at the level that is required. So we must paint the right context that this is in the interest of the citizens of this country, that they get the right share of their own tax for development and for service delivery. We cannot afford to consume the entire tax on wages alone. Remember, the public service employs a very small number of Kenyans. So what happens to the rest of the country? And that, Linda, is a very important conversation to have. And this is about taxes that is collected by government and how the government spends money. The taxpayer surely has a say on how it should be spent.
All right, the taxpayer has a say on how it should be.
The services that they should get.
All right, and as we bring this conversation to an end, Ms. Mengich, for the public service, the pay is not that good for civil servants, and for them, their allowances looks at as if it's lucrative as a way of survival. And now that you've said no allowances should be given to both state and civil servants within the next 2 years, clearly this will create room for corruption. It will create it will actually discourage workers in terms of their morale will go down. We'll see a lot of moonlighting. We'll see a lot of exit from the public sector. Doesn't this worry the commission when it was giving the advice to the Treasury?
Linda, let me clarify that first and foremost, it is not correct to say that the pay of the public service is small. In fact, surveys demonstrate over and over again that the pay in the public sector is very good compared to the private sector. As we speak today, a study that the Commission carried out in 2018 shows that the public sector has a retention rate of 95%. Last year, 2020, we carried out the same survey, and the retention rate is at 90%. And the 10% that are moving is within the public sector. It is not even to the private sector. Less than 5% of public sector move to the private sector. So, Linda, we are confident we have the data to demonstrate that it is not true that the pay in the public sector is not competitive. It is competitive, Retention is very high, and therefore that is not a main worry at the moment.
All right. I know I'd say it finally, but this is the final question. It will be unfair for me to end this conversation without asking you, because one of the advice that you gave the Treasury, as we wind up in a minute, Ms. Mengage, was no new CBA should be negotiated within this period. So what happens to union officials who had already started negotiating with their employers in terms of a salary increment for their union members and also in terms of their allowances? Wouldn't this cause a strike notices being given to the Ministry of Labour and employers?
Linda, thank you. There is no such an advice from the Commission. The Commission did not advise that you cannot enter into any collective bargaining agreements. Let me also clarify that the CBA has financial and non-financial elements. Our advisory will only affect the financial, but at no point the Commission say you cannot enter into collective bargaining agreements. They are free to do so, and the process is still that they will still come to the Commission insofar as any financial aspect of the CBA are concerned, and the Commission will give its advisory, which will be in the context of the advice that we issued last week.
All right, thank you for clarifying that. There you have it, the SRC chairperson saying that the Commission did not give any order in terms of